Hey everybody, today we're going to be working on a MacBook Air. Looks like this MacBook Air has no backlight. Wow. It's a good thing I grab hard jobs like these before they go to Paul. Alright, let's open this up and see what's going on inside this MacBook. I'm going to try to make enough space on my desk for all this stuff, but when I push the machine forward, it pushes my keyboard forward, and pushing my keyboard forward means my multimeter being knocked off the desk. The joys of having a spacious workplace. Alright. They're not really interested in that shindig. So if we ask for a few months of free rent to set up, they're going to say no. We went on back and forth on that point for about a half hour yesterday. So a lot of people were saying in the Allen Street space you weren't really doing much negotiating. That's not how you go back and forth and bargain. And one of the reasons I wasn't really bargaining in that space is since I had decided in my head, when I saw how small it was, that I don't really want this, I didn't really enter a negotiating mindset. And I didn't really notice it until I listened back to the video, but I was talking about that space like somebody who just wanted to get fleeced. But the reality of it is when I saw the amount of space, I walked in, I realized that I wouldn't even have a space for, wouldn't even have space to record privately. Like, even in this small dump of a store, there is a barrier that exists between me and the outside world. That fan and that column with the red panel. That is a barrier. And that does not even exist in that other space. And if I were to put it up, it would make the space too small. So I just couldn't get myself into the mindset for it. But yeah, I went at it with that other guy. Steve went at it with that guy. And it just, that doesn't sound right, but don't take me out of context, mofo. Anyway, we got nowhere. He's not interested in making any concession there. So we'll see. We'll see what construction costs for the place, and if it's too much, I'm just going to say screw it. Okay, so a stated problem that we have here is no backlight, but one of the issues that I see, is, and maybe you'll see as well, is that this place is as populated as the basement of that restaurant that I looked at. But remember the video I uploaded where you had the American roach eating the Oriental roach? Thanks, by the way, to the guy that told me what species of roaches they were that were eating each other. That's just lovely information to have to read that comment before my morning breakfast. But yeah, look who's hiding in this board. How's it going, fella? How's it going? How's it going? I'm just gonna take you up. Wait, where is he? Uh-oh. I have a leg. Prank backfired. Oh. So, if we continue looking around this board, you'll see that the backlight area looks fairly disgusting. So pins 3 and 4 are going to be for backlight, and they're either intensely corroded or entirely missing. And then let me just show you how we would get that idea. So the customer's complaint is no backlight on the screen. Now usually I make a couple of measurements to give me an idea what's going on before digging in. I like to measure the backlight voltage because different backlight voltages mean different things. If I'm getting 26 volts of backlight, it works. If I'm getting 39 or 49 volts of backlight, it means the board is making backlight voltage, but it's not making its way to the screen because of a break in the line between backlight output and the screen, whether it's the screen cable, damaged screen, backlight cable not plugged in on the screen assembly itself. If I'm getting 19 volts, it means it is trying to boost. It has the capability to boost, but it's stuck at the lowest brightness because either the PWM signal is missing or because it thinks the machine is closed, which can happen if the SMC lid signal is low. SMC lid is going to be the signal that's 3.4 volts when the machine is open and 0.5 or 0 volts when it's closed. If sometimes you don't have an issue with your backlight circuit, you actually have an issue where the machine thinks it's closed and people drive themselves nuts troubleshooting a backlight circuit that works rather than troubleshooting a lid sensor that has failed. That's causing a tertiary problem. So I don't really, and if I'm getting 8 volts, there's no boosting, and if I'm getting 0 volts, that will mean the fuse is blown or short to ground. And if I'm getting like 0.1 or 1 volt, 0 volt, 1 volt, 0 volt, 3 volt, 0 volt, intermittent break in the intermittent line break inside the board. But what's going on here is fairly obvious to me. I mean, you can see how nasty this board looks, so I don't need to go through measuring voltage or even turning it on. I have it right in front of me and I can see it. So we're going to take this board out and we're going to do, rather than brain work to try and figure out how to focus on, we're going to do sight work. And the thing that's best about doing sight work, meaning I see corroded or I see broken, I fix broken, as Mark Schaefer at iPad Rehab would call it, I see broken, I fix broken, is you save your brain. Because you can do I see broken, I fix broken all day without getting too exhausted, but when you allow yourself to become mentally exhausted, in the case of somebody like Anel who's inhaling solder fumes without his fume extractor on, Lewis, I ordered some greenies for Clinton. I got a message saying the package cannot be delivered because it was damaged. They will be there one day. Hope everything goes well with the store search. Thank you very much, Armistice. Mr. Clinton appreciates his greenies and sends his thanks. Thank you. What was I saying? Oh yeah, so the great thing about... I forgot my train of thought. I see somebody with a broken cell phone is in the chat. Well, the great thing about I see broken, I fix broken is that it doesn't allow you to become mentally exhausted. Because if you're spending your whole day trying to, think through your problems, it's really easy to become mentally exhausted, and it's no good. So I try to spend as much of my day as possible in the no-brain section, so that when I actually do need my brain to figure out a problem, it's there, rather than wasting it on this stuff. So I'm not going to bother measuring voltages, any of that, because, I know my problem. And my other problem is that this bug is still on this computer, rather than on Anel's desk where it belongs. Monster Energy?
Just leave it on Paul's desk.
Leave it on Paul's desk. He won't mind. Paul's used to worse stuff being on his desk. What is that?
Looks like a rainbow.
I wonder if that shows up in the camera. Whoa. What is this? Why does his phone look like a rainbow? Wow. That's pretty. That's pretty. It looks like Paul Daniels is here. Everybody give a nice warm welcome to our friend Paul Daniels from pldaniels.com.
Mark's photos. He wants photos too.
This is no backlight due to bugs, Paul.
Okay. Till $20 more. Just give him the USB for media. I'm assuming 64 gigs is enough for this photos.
So wait, one for backup and one for the board?
Yeah, because Kevin didn't realize it's never going to fit in one USB, so we charged him more. Give him two USBs just for right media.
Yes. Yeah, I'll do that.
Don't worry. Just
I ate my breakfast too quickly. Oh boy.
Okay.
This board is really dusty, nasty, filthy, and has furry creatures in it. Be right back while I use some compressed air on this disgusting crash. You're probably going to hear some really nasty noises in a second, so if you are a headphone user, I would suggest running away and throwing your headphones down immediately. Those who stay will go deaf. Fair warning has been issued. 1, 2. I'm sorry, I forgot to go outside. Crap.
Actually, it's $20 more than
How much are you getting total?
300.
Just fuck it.
Fuck it. My bad. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Disgusting machine.
Abort. Put everything on this. Yeah, abort. Confusion. Wait, it's 2 terabytes. You can get your 1 terabyte.
Yeah. You don't have 500s?
No, 1 terabyte is the smallest we get. They're already pretty cheap. 500 would be like the sweet spot for this, but it's just fucking.
How much are they?
Sell them for $70 or
Yeah.
You think like
They're doing it so fast.
Well,
iPhones.
the point is that these are for Steve's recoveries. Steve starts at like 500 gigs and up, you know? I just kind of poach them from him every once in a while. So, and I haven't seen many phones that extend the backup,
So-
the backup is larger than 120 gigs.
Yeah, that's some nasty corrosion over here by our backlight driver.
Then we can maybe start thinking about
That's some really nasty corrosion by our backlight driver. Our backlight driver is not going to be able to drive anywhere. Look at that. And you're actually missing a ball on the bottom right there. So look at this. See, you can see that the left ball is well formed even if covered in dirt. But all the way in the right, that ball is gone. So let's kind of discuss why it is that that ball corrodes, because it's not going to be that that's the only, the one ball is always going to be the one where water lands on. Obviously, when water lands on the machine, it may get to a specific part more often than other parts, just by way of how the machine is designed. But the water is not going to target this ball versus that ball. And there's a reason that that one is going to blow more often than the rest. So we're going to open up a schematic and a board view and go over why it is that that's going to be the one that most commonly blows and the one that most commonly has junk around it, because this is something that's actually applicable to backlight circuits and many of the other machines. Anel has the hiccups. I think that's his stomach and body's way of asking for another bug to be put in his monster drink while he's not looking. Chat, let's have a vote. Should a bug be put in his monster drink while he's not looking? Your fate is subject to YouTube. Okay. So if we take a look at the backlight circuit, first thing we have to do is take a look at the screen circuit. So if we take a look at the screen connector here, this is the LCD connector, internal DP connector. That does not stand for double penetration. That stands for display port, a protocol, not double penetration, a Pornhub protocol. So this over here is PPHV SOSW backlight. PPHV is not related to HPV or HIV. This is power high voltage. I'm guessing because typically most of the power rails in this start with PP bus or PP3V. PP is probably power plane or power something. PPHV means high voltage, not an STD. So this is going to be backlight. Before we have backlight present, typically we need to have 3 volts present for the screen. So once the screen turns on and we get an image, 3 volts, then it's going to talk to it, it's going to have a nice little conversation with the machine, and then the machine's going to turn on the backlight rail. But where does our PPHV SOSW LCD Bicklet come from? PPHV comes from not what you're thinking of. It's going to come from our backlight circuit. And our backlight circuit is visible right over here. So let's just take a look at this in a full screen mode to make it nice and easy to see. So we're going to be getting in voltage from our PP Bus G3 hub. That's going to be coming in from either the battery or the charger. Then it's going to go through a fuse that almost never blows. You'll see later. And this is going to go to this coil. Now, the way a DC to DC boost circuit works is you have voltage going through the coil, and then this chip is going to continuously short the voltage after the coil to grounds. And each time it shorts it to ground, it's going to cause the coil to shoot out a pulse that's actually higher than where it started. So let's say you have 8 volts going through the coil, and when you short it to ground on the other side, when you're done shorting it to ground, it's not just going to go from 8 volts to 0 and back up to 8. It's going to go from 8 volts to 0 and back up to like 20 or 30 or something like that. You're going to get a little spike that's high in voltage. And I went over this in an older video on how a DC to DC boost circuit works, where I actually show you on the oscilloscope what it looks like. So here's the 8 volts going in, here's the spikes going out. Now you're going to have a bunch of spikes coming out of it, but the spikes coming out are not going to be good enough because the screen is not going to look good if you have spikes of voltage. It needs to be something that's steady. So you now have these capacitors to ground over here, and these capacitors to ground are going to store that. So rather than have a bunch of pulses, you have a nice steady state 25 or 27 volts for your screen. This diode here is going to be in place so that this stored 27 volts for your backlight that's being stored by the caps doesn't go backwards into the system where 8 volts is, because you can imagine if you had a bunch of caps charged up to 27 volts and you had an 8 volt lithium ion battery over here and you just send 27 volts straight to those cells. You would destroy your system. So you have a diode here to prevent that from happening, and you also have what's called feedback. So switch, SW, is going to be where this switch is ground, but then you have feedback where the backlight circuit is going to want to see how much voltage it's producing. So the speed at which it switches is going to be what determines what voltage you get to. Now, it needs to know, it's just like if you're driving a car, am I going too fast? Am I going too slow? You need to be able to see out the windshield. You need to be able to see your speedometer. If you can't see your speedometer and you can't see out your windshield, you may get an idea of where you are just from muscle memory, but likely you're going to run somebody over or smash into something. It's going to be bad. The same thing is true over here. The circuit wants to know what it's doing. It knows, I may need to switch this many times. You may be able to program that inside the chip. If I'm being asked to make this much voltage, then I must switch this many times. Much just like you, it's going to want to see out its windshield. And this is what FB is for, feedback. It wants to see what it's creating. Now, this is the highest voltage point in the system. Remember, this is where the pulses of 27 volts are. This over here is going to be where 8 volts is, and over here is going to be where you have your 27 volt steady state. So when water gets on this chip, even though it looks kind of uneven in distribution, many people are going to look at this and say, it seems like your damage, all the water hit the right side, but it didn't really hit the left side. That's not quite true. The water hit this chip evenly. It splashed on here evenly, but the reason you see the most violent corrosion on the right and not on the left is because on the right side of the chip, that's where you have feedback. Can you stop that? Just rip it off. Band-Aid. See? Feedback. That is feedback. So that's why that area looks nastiest. So next up, we're going to take a look and apply that same theory to our LCD connector. So many people are going to probably think something like, wow, all the water seems to have gotten on the left, and none of the water seems to have gotten on the right. Well, again, that's not actually the case. The same amount of water most likely made it across this entire place. And if you just take a look at the spot over here, see this puddle? You can kind of see where the water dripped. So it dripped around there, and then around there, and there. So it's made its way throughout this entire connector. But all the damage that you see is present on the left and not on the right. Well, why is all the damage present on the left side and not on the right side? Well, if you look over here, pin 3 is our PPHV, and PPHV is going to cause corrosion. That is where the highest voltage in that circuit is. The highest voltage is going to be where there's the most damage by the water, and that's our problem. So let's remove that LCD connector using our quick hot air station available at store.rossmangroup.com. Using some authentic Amtech flux, also available at store.rossmangroup.com. And replace that LCD connector in LP8550 with new ones. And, well, you know where to buy them by now. So, we're going to remove this and replace it with a better one. I was working on my bike before, so I have my fume extractor stuck under my desk. Just got to bring the vent up, which means I'm plugging my monitor because there's no space for the wires in this shithole. Now, you can actually remove that connector if you heat it slowly from far away without causing any damage to the plastic. But there's some cathartic element to burning and destroying pieces of Apple products that brings me joy in my saddest moments in life. Watching that little connector just burn into pieces, it just makes me smile. Burn, Apple, burn. Okay. Now the next up that we're going to have to deal with here are some of those burn pads on the left. Remember, the left is going to have more burn pads than the right because the left is where the higher voltage line sits. Now, the wick that I'm using to remove all the solder, keep in mind I put leaded solder over it to help me suck up the lead-free solder, which is hard to remove. And then I'm using the wick here. The wick actually kind of doubles as kind of like a little bit of sandpaper. Think of it like a nail filer. See, there were pads under there, and you thought there were no pads under there, but there were pads under there. They were just covered under garbage. And you could have probably sworn that pad 4 was gone. But it's not. See? It's right there. It's just hiding. So we just made it visible again using this wick that, honestly, even I'm sick and tired of hearing me shill, but you know where you can buy it at this point. Now, you don't want to scrape away too much of the board ground plane. And particularly if you're dealing with a BGA chip, you're going to have to be a lot more careful than I am. I'm not being super concerned about wiping stuff off for 2 reasons. A, this board looks like complete and utter dog shit, and B, the traces that are exposed are not exposed around a ball gritterate chip where I have to worry about, you'll see when I move the other one, where I have to worry about like this thing shorting to this thing, shorting to this thing. It's just a bunch of pins left to right, so it's an area where I'm not as concerned. Hello, JP. How are you doing today? Battery for the air horn is out for delivery. Oh, God. That's going to be something. You know, I actually have to pick up some stuff at the Home Depot so that I can put the better motor controller on my main bike. And I also have to replace the stator, I think. The pinion. The thingy that does the spinning. I mean, the thingy that actually does the spinning of the gear. And I have to replace that in the other bike because I had somebody use it yesterday that destroyed it. They were not used to the power. But no biggie. Right. So right now I'm down to 1 bike from 2. No big deal. Okay, so now we're going to find ourselves an LCD connector, which means going to the front of the store, which means that... Actually, no, I don't have to go to the front of the store. It's right here. Oh, beautiful. I grabbed 2 last time. You ever realize that you think you have to get up, and then at the last minute you realize you don't have to get up? It's one of the most beautiful feelings that life has to offer. The rewarding of sloth laziness
I guess so, yeah.
as a technician. I thought I had to get up to get a part and it was right in front of me. It takes so little to make people happy. At least me. It really takes very little to make me happy. Okay, so we've got our connector here. I'm going to just put a little bit of flux over there. Not, just a teeny tiny bit. Barely noticeable amount. A small number, as they would say at the Apple store. At the Apple PR department. Someone says, I can't believe how expensive monthly rental costs are there in your area. I don't know how they expect business to make any money. Well, that's the thing. It's funny because what they do is they ask for a lot of money, while at the same time, they wonder, oh my God, yeah, it just seems like every other year they go out of business. And one of the people said recently that I met that thought his store was worth $18,000 when it was a total crap hole. The guy said, a lot of these places are opening that shouldn't have been opening to begin with because they weren't viable. And they would have been viable. Some of them were not viable. But there are other places that would have been viable if they weren't being financially raped by the realty, the real estate holding company that owns the building or that landlord. And one of the things I really would like to see happen in New York, I know this is kind of sick and twisted of me, and perhaps it is just a bit, what's the word? Perhaps it is a bit too dark, is I would love to see people start to realize that New York isn't really that special. A lot of the venues and places that were made the place cool are gone or have left. That in the age of Patreon and GoFundMe, that you don't need to be in Manhattan in order to find money anymore. That you can, if you're good at what you do or interesting at it or a good musician, you could be in the middle of absolute nowhere and gain a following and gain fans and gain exposure, like real exposure, not that kind of New York crap that doesn't pay you any money. Gain exposure, gain a fan base, make money, all that stuff that you used to think get an audience that you thought you needed to be in New York to do, that you could do just about anywhere else. And I would love to see companies start opening elsewhere, and innovative companies opening elsewhere, doing cool things, people doing cool things outside New York, to the point where someday there really is no value or supreme value to that New York premium, and that all these landlords that were holding out to get as much as humanly possible realize, well, not only did I not make any money for the 2 to 4 years that I wasn't renting my space out, but now nobody really values it at all anyway. So not only did I not get the money that I could have gotten, but I'm never going to get those rates again. And I would like to see the places that kind of helped empty New York City and hollow it out pay for it, but in that kind of free market-ish way where people just realize, wait a second, I'm kind of surrounded by chasing Starbucks, so what am I doing here? Why am I paying $4,000 to $8,000 to $10,000 to $12,000 a month for this luxury condo building apartment, for this luxury place, when all I'm getting out of it is chasing Starbucks? Let me move someplace that's actually cool. One of the interesting things that I was listening to in this 1 or 2 hour long Andrew Yang interview was about how people migrating between states is lower now than it's been in a long time. And I kind of wonder why. Because there are times in our country's history that we've been much poorer than we are now, and people still migrate. I mean, people talk about how it's easier to get a car, a house, whatever, previous generation than now. But I mean, there was still more interstate migration when people were genuinely broke and destitute, to a point that we barely understand now. And there's very little interstate migration between people. I'd like to see people just realize, if I need an education, I don't need to go to New York to get it. If I want to pursue my artistic career, I don't need to go to New York to do that. Who knows, if I want to open a really interesting technology-based business, I don't need to do that specifically in New York or California. I mean, it'll take a while, but I'd love to see that start happening. We'll see. I'm most likely dreaming. Speaking of dreaming, let's see if that fuse is blown. So, you saw how damaged those pins were and that connector was, right? Let's take a look and see if that backlight fuse is blown. Of course it's not. It's an Apple product. Why have the fuse blow when you can simply have all the circuitry in front of it corrode itself away and get destroyed and burned and rusted? Apple. Apple. Okay, so now some of the newer designs are actually cool in that they incorporate current sensing circuits. I shouldn't even say newer. 2013 Retina and up. They didn't implement it into the Air because it probably would have cost them an extra 1 or 2 cents, but they incorporated it into the Retinas, where if the system sees that there's too much current draw by the backlight circuit, it just turns off power to the backlight circuit, which I think is pretty cool. You're not only it's not blowing the fuse, but it's also not destroying the computer at the same time. Rather, here you got a backlight fuse that could probably bench press 315 for sets, bench 3 plates for sets of 15 kind of thing. But when you have microscopes back in stock, when the boat gets them here, thank you very much for the $1.99. Yeah, so they're on a boat right now, and when the boat arrives, I will have them. But not when does the boat arrive? That's an excellent question. The enable resistors are typically the first to go, so we get rid of that. Alright, that is one encrusted looking dump. Okay, now if there are any pads left there, I would like to do my best to preserve them. So I put a bunch of flux there, and I'm going to run the solder ball over the area just to pick up the lead-free solder, if possible, potentially tin any of the pads that are still tinnable. That's tinnable, not tenable. We're tinning the pads. I don't want to put much pressure on them here, especially not with a large iron. So once we're done with this segment, then I'm going to go over it with the tiny iron. Now I'm going to wick, mildly wick. Okay, we go over like this, being very mild, not pushing down too hard, because remember this is BGA, we don't want to mess up traces too much. Okay. Hot air some of that goop away so that'll be easier for me to do some scraping with the micro pencil. Okay, so we're ready to start some surgery. Now the area that I told you about that's going to have the greatest damage to it, over here. The feedback ball. That is the area that is the nastiest. So let's see if we can get that up to speed. So I'm going to take my micro pencil, which is a T30-KN tip. You can see links in the description down below. And see if there's anything under there. That will gentle scraping bring that back, the same way that it brought back my backlight pins and my LCD connector. Survey says no. Okay, so maybe we're going to go over that with a knife. So there's a little bit there, but that's still going to need a jumper wire. See what the knife is doing? Scraping very gently. And now we're just going to clean it up with some alcohol. Okay, now that may not actually need a jumper, but I'd still like to make it a little bit more secure just for my own OCD's sake. So usually I have all the pads flat and then I put the chip on top of the pads and then I work that way. In this case, since I'm going to be adding a jumper, the jumper is going to raise everything a little bit, which means that I'm going to have each pad have a little bit of solder on it before I solder my chip, which is going to make it a little bit more difficult. Also, by the way, earlier when I was talking about BGA pads, like, see these types of traces, you don't want them to be broken in between here, because sometimes the balls, when you're soldering the chip, can go to the wrong place. So we're just going to put a little bit of solder there. I'm going to solder each of these over. Not going to scrape too much. There we go. Now we're going to bring back this probe point over here for backlight enable. We don't want to solder on top of rust, so scraping is necessary every now and then. Okay, now for this area, I'm just going to put a little jumper wire. Nothing crazy. Also, check this out. This is one of the parts that's cool. So, remember what I said about how backlight output over here is going to go to feedback? Well, backlight output goes to these two pads over here, right? And then backlight output goes to feedback. So it actually goes through here, interestingly enough. So if we take a look at what those 2 points look like on the board, you can see that even those two are the most corroded looking of these little probe points over here. So let's see what type of continuity, if any, that we have in that area. So backlight output over here, backlight feedback over there. It looks good. So I'm just going to secure that with a jumper, make it a little... And again, these are the differences between a board that's going to last for 2 months and a board that's going to last for 10 years. Is these little details. And these are the little details that you don't want to miss, because if you miss these details, the customer is going to wind up coming back and say it's doing the same thing it's doing before. And one of the things that you get with independent repair, when you hear people talk about why you should or shouldn't use it, they use junk parts, they do crappier work, they're going to mess up the board, they're going to rip you off. You have to understand, when you're the third party, when people go to the dealer, there's so many people that simply go to the dealer and they just take their word as gospel. But when you're a third party, people are going to examine and scrutinize everything that you say, especially when the manufacturers like to say scary things about what happens when you go to a third party. So it's important that you represent your business as well as humanly possible by caring about these little details. Because if you don't care about these little details, you lose the trust of your customer. People don't want to show up with the same problem they had 2 weeks ago. Yeah, it's going to happen every now and then, you know. Nobody's perfect, and nobody can anticipate every single little thing that's going to go wrong on something that looks like it spent a day in a sewer. But you got to put your best effort in to make sure that your customer does not have the problem they had originally again. They may come back with a different problem, and if you work in this business, they may claim that the different problem they're having is the same as the one they had before, but that's different. So Alright, we're going to fold that little wire around. Make ourselves a happy little BGA jumper wire. A happy little jumper. Yes. Good little jumper. Good little jumper. And just to be safe, we're going to solder that little jumper straight to backlight output over here. Add some flux over there while we're doing our work. Oh boy, that was a little too bright. I would like to have a dual monitor set up in front of me, but I literally do not have the space for it. Because then I would be able to see everything you see in chat and schematics at the same time. Or a chat monitor, a schematic monitor, and what I'm working on monitor would be awesome. But that's one of those things that we will figure out as we're looking for new space. See this, let's just say that there's a break in backlight and from backlight output from the top of the board to the bottom. What this does is it gives me an option to run something directly onto that chip later without having to take the chip off again. So let's say that this is weakly attached to that. Tell my mommy I love her and I miss her dearly and I wish she would come back and love me. Your mommy is too busy delivering mail for pretty girls that will complain about that mail not getting to its destination at the same day. Your mommy doesn't actually love you. She loves her mail. Okay, so now we need to find ourselves an LED driver. I'm going to get an LED driver and we're going to solder it in there and see if we got a working backlight circuit. You're probably going to hear some really loud noises. Some loud, uncomfortable noises. The squelch feature on my Sennheiser transmitter that costs like $400 refuses to work. You're probably going to go deaf as I approach the front of the store, as my mic gives out and shoots out static. You have scissor.
Okay. So, if you want to, are you going to need one? Yeah, so if you have liquid damage, it's best if you just bring it by. We can take a look at an exit while you're here. Typically, the repairs on liquid damage stairs
Phoebe the cat. Alright, so we've got ourselves a LED driver. Alright, so now we're going to clean up some of that excess flux. I used the wrong word there. There is no such thing as excess flux. Old crusty stuff from our previous job. We're going to get ready to place a new chip using even more Amtech flux. Now, if I were to blow at this chip before it's really situated on the board, it would just fly away. This is really like being a puppet master. Like when I'm doing this, it's like when you see a puppet master, they're doing this, like leaning over and all that stuff. They're not just going, and that's what I'm trying to do here. So if I just run in here with my hot air and it's like, boo, like the chip's gonna get blown off the board, obviously. What I'm doing here is I'm trying to point the air directly down at the chip at all times. Also, I'm noticing the amount of flux that's around the chip. If there's a bunch of flux around the chip, I'm not going to go in for the kill yet. I'm going to wait until the flux, that most of the other stuff goes away. Wait till there's just a teeny tiny little bit right around the chip. Watch as that pull slowly goes away. That means the flux has become more watery rather than mud-like. And then go in. And then the chip is going to fall down. See that? The chip done fell down. Now we make it dance. Dance, LED driver, dance. Now we're going to solder resistor, capacitor, resistor. I honestly forget what the sequence is over there. But it doesn't really matter. I'm just going to grab myself a donor board, take those 4 resistors off, and then after that we're going to test the backlight area. Now obviously after that section, after that's done, there are other parts of the board that we're going to have to attend to. This is a nasty looking board and there's a lot of small housekeeping that's going to have to be done in order for the rest of it to be something that I'd be comfortable warrantying into the future. And a lot of that work I'm probably going to do after I take a break. But at the very least I want to show you all completed backlight circuit. So we're just going to put the resistors that were next to that chip that were a little corroded back on the board. There we go. I found myself a happy little donor board that's got all that stuff on it. It's going to be great. And we go from there. Let's get rid of that. That wire that you see there is magnet wire. It has a nice enamel coating. Now when I was putting that wire onto the chip, one of the things you may notice is that I was scraping away at the edge, which was beige in color, and it'll become silver in color like the solder. Also notice I'm not using a bunch of heat right now. I don't really care if there's not a perfect solder joint on those resistors I'm putting on. I'm really just concerned about just getting them to stay put. Because we're going to flow everything in one go in a moment, but I want to use the least heat possible to get everything done. Especially considering that I'm heating this area over and over and over again. We're mainly just interested in getting everything on the board. Now that we're about to put the last resistor on, I will allow myself the luxury of a little bit more heat. And also I'm going to put some flux there so that all the stuff over there that's barely flowed into place because I was, biding my time, is all that's going to flow into place now because I'm going to use enough heat, enough time to get everything else that I kind of shoddily put on there properly flowed into place. Do that. Now I'm going to stay there and you're going to watch those resistors kind of dance into place. And they're going to settle. See how they just all kind of jumped into place? See how beautiful that is? That's the power. Surface tension, nice Amtech flux. And there's one area that could use a little bit of touch up right here. This could be a better joint. So we're just gonna do this. I'm not a lefty, so that's a little difficult. But yeah, that's fine. Even that up. Yeah. Trying to solder with your other hand is quite the challenge. And again, there's still junk here. This needs ultrasonic cleaning. This needs component replacements. We're hardly done. But let's just take a look and see if our backlight area is happy. Also, this area, this could use much cleaning. Alright. That little SMC reset resistor could use a little TLC as well. I'm sure that SMC reset resistor could use a death sentence. So let's just do that. This is the most important resistor in this area. It's going to be responsible for allowing the SMC to turn on and work. It pulls up the SMC reset signal, which if it's pulled down, puts the SMC into reset, which we don't want the SMC to be reset. If you want an understanding as to why it is we don't want the reset to be pulled down, so that the reset is always present, if you have a desktop computer you're watching this on, right while you're watching this video, I want you to press the reset button and hold it in. And that is what happens when the reset button is held down. Just keep the reset button held in, don't actually take your finger off of it, and you'll see. That's why we don't want the reset button held in. And at that point, alright, looks like the number of people viewing the stream has gone down. We did get some people that actually did hit their reset button. Good stuff. Way to go. It's one way to lose viewership. It's one way to lose viewership. Remember, I'm scraping there. I'm scraping because you're not putting solder on top of rust. It's not happening. Nope. And any of the junky, corroded, is going to get sucked up into that solder ball. This solder has some nice flux built into it, which makes doing that easy. I should have some links to the solder that I like to use down below, along with everything else I like to use you'll find down below. Okay, now we're at a point now where I feel comfortable testing this with a test screen. I don't want to use the screen that the customer has because that cable's a little nasty. But let's see, how nasty are you? Actually, no, you know what? It's not that nasty. It's not as nasty as I remember it. It's a good thing that I double checked. So we're going to try and see if we get a backlight on this MacBook screen. And if we do, then we can get to focusing on all the other issues with the board. And that will be that. So let's just clean the desk off a little bit.
You should change to streaming the Apple event and just like wrecking their shit.
I don't know anything about the Apple event.
No, but like the shit they're saying they have 99.something% of satisfied customers. You missed it. 99% satisfied customers. That was Tim Cook speaking. Highest in the industry.
I don't know. It's not like anything I'm saying is something that people wouldn't expect.
No, it's just like the bullshit is off the charts. They were complaining about the real estate salesman. Listen to Tim Cook speak. 99.9% customer satisfaction.
Ask everybody with an iPhone 7 that has an audio IC failure if they feel that way. Slightly less solder on the edge there. Do you offer 99.9% customer satisfaction, Anel?
Are they satisfied with the half soldered QFN chip?
.25 volts. We should be seeing a question mark folder soon. 25 volts is a healthy backlight voltage. Shortly, you'll see a nice, happy question mark folder, meaning that our job, with the backlight circuit at least, is close to complete. And there you go. So now we're going to go through the rest of this board, go through it with the microscope with a nice fine-tooth comb, find all the stuff that's a little corroded, replace it, flux it, file it, and then put it in the ultrasonic cleaner, test everything, and send this out the door and call it a day. After making sure that it all works, that's going to take a bit of time, and that part is kind of boring. But we'll do that off camera. But for the most part, that is a no backlight issue on a MacBook Air. That is how we approach it. That is how we fix it when it's filled with liquid damage. And as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you in the next video. Thank you for watching.